¿Te imaginas conocer una de las historias más perturbadoras de la vida real mientras mejoras tu inglés? Hoy viajaremos a un pequeño pueblo de Wisconsin para descubrir la escalofriante historia de Ed Gein, el hombre conocido como el Carnicero de Plainfield, cuyos crímenes inspiraron algunas de las películas de terror más famosas de la historia. Mientras escuchas esta historia en inglés, podrás practicar tu listening, aprender vocabulario nuevo y mejorar tu comprensión auditiva de una forma mucho más entretenida que con las lecciones tradicionales. Ponte cómodo y prepárate para aprender inglés con una historia que jamás olvidarás.
There is a type of person the world never sees coming. Not a violent stranger. Not a known criminal. Not someone who looks dangerous. Someone quiet. Someone polite. Someone who fixes your fence, babysits your children, and waves at you from across the street. Someone your neighbors would describe as a little strange, but harmless. In the small town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, that person was Ed Gein. And when police finally walked through the front door of his farmhouse on November 16, 1957, they didn't find a killer. They found something that didn't have a name yet. Something that would go on to inspire the most terrifying fictional monsters in cinema history. This is the true story behind Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the Silence of the Lambs. This is the story of Ed Gein, the quiet man from Plainfield. To understand Ed Gein, you first need to understand Plainfield. Plainfield, Wisconsin. Population, around 700 people. A flat, quiet stretch of farmland in the American Midwest. Rye fields, cattle ranches, dense forests, cold winters. In the 1950s, life in Plainfield followed a simple rhythm. Men worked the land or hunted deer in the autumn season. Women ran small businesses or managed their homes. Children played in the fields and gathered around campfires at night. And at those campfires, children told stories. One story in particular kept coming back. About a farmhouse on the edge of town. About the strange man who lived there alone. About the human skulls he supposedly kept as decoration. Some children claimed they had snuck up to the farmhouse at night and seen a strange shadow moving inside. The adults of Plainfield heard these stories, and almost all of them did the same thing. They smiled, shook their heads, and went back to their lives. Because they knew the man who lived there. His name was Ed, and Ed was harmless. He was shy. He was quiet. He was helpful. He repaired things around people's houses, charged fair prices, and sometimes took care of children when parents needed to be away. He was odd, yes. He sometimes laughed at nothing. He made strange comments. But odd is not dangerous. Or so they thought. Ed Gein was born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse, Wisconsin. He was the second child of George and Augusta Gein. On paper, the Gein family looked ordinary. But inside that house, something was deeply, permanently wrong. The father, George Gein, was a weak man in the worst sense of the word. He drank heavily, spent money the family didn't have, and showed no real attachment to his wife or children. He was absent even when he was physically present. He died in 1940, and his sons felt nothing but relief. The mother, Augusta Gein, was something else entirely. She was a deeply religious woman, intensely, obsessively religious. She believed the world outside her home was filled with sin, corruption, and temptation. She raised her sons accordingly. She controlled everything. What they read, who they spoke to, where they went. She forbade them from making friends, warning that other children were bad influences and moral threats. She told them that all women, except herself, were instruments of the devil. She also told them that she did not love them. Not in those words, but in 1,000 small acts of coldness and criticism every single day. She punished them constantly. She never praised them. She kept them isolated from the world. And she read them the Bible, especially passages about death, murder, and the punishment of sinners. In 1913, the family moved to a farmhouse outside Plainfield. And that farm became a prison. Ed and his brother Henry grew up in those fields, barely leaving the property. The town of Plainfield was close, but for the Gein boys it might as well have been another country. The brother, Henry Gein, the older brother, eventually began to resist his mother's control. He questioned her. He pushed back. In 1944, the brothers were helping to fight a brush fire near the farm. When the fire was out, Henry was dead. He was found lying face down on the ground, away from the fire, with bruising on his head. The police ruled it an accidental death, suffocation from smoke. No investigation was opened. Ed led the officers directly to his brother's body, without searching. Nobody asked why. The death of Augusta. The following year, in 1945, Ed Gein suffered a series of strokes and died. Ed was 39 years old. For his entire life, his mother had been the only human being he was close to. She had controlled him, hurt him, and loved him, all at once. And now she was gone. Ed closed off her bedroom. He kept it exactly as she had left it, untouched, preserved, like a shrine. Then he sealed off the rest of the upper floor as well. He retreated to the kitchen and one small room downstairs. And he was completely, utterly alone. What Ed Gein did next unfolded slowly, quietly, over more than a decade, and almost no one saw it happening. In the years after his mother's death, Ed became obsessed with two things. The first was reading. Not the Bible, not anymore. He read true crime magazines, horror comics, anatomy books, and news stories about Nazi experiments during World War II. He collected every article he could find about medical procedures, body preservation, and human dissection. The second obsession was the obituary section of the local newspaper. Ed read the obituaries carefully. When a woman of a certain age died and was buried in the Plainfield cemetery, a woman who reminded him of his mother, he made note of it. And at night, he went to the cemetery. He dug up the graves. He took what he wanted, heads, organs, skin, and he brought them back to the farm. This went on for years. Quietly, in the dark, in a town where nothing ever happened. Eventually, the graves were not enough. On December 8, 1954, a woman named Mary Hogan disappeared. Mary Hogan ran the local tavern. She was 54 years old, divorced, and had moved to Plainfield from Chicago years earlier. The townspeople found her fascinating and slightly scandalous. When someone entered the tavern that December morning, they found an empty room, a pool of blood on the floor, and a spent shotgun shell. Mary Hogan was gone. The police investigated, found nothing, closed the case. Some months later, Ed was talking to a neighbor named Elmo Yuk. The conversation turned to Mary Hogan's disappearance. Yuk joked that if Ed had liked her so much, he should have said something while he had the chance. Ed smiled, rolled his eyes upward, and said, "She isn't missing. She's at my farm right now." Then he laughed. Yuk assumed it was one of Ed's strange jokes. He didn't mention it to anyone. 3 years passed. November 16, 1957. The first day of deer hunting season in Wisconsin. Almost every man in Plainfield was out in the woods since before dawn. The streets were empty. The businesses were quiet. At the local hardware store, a woman named Bernice Wardens opened for the morning. Bernice was 58 years old. She was well-respected, conservative, and had been running that store for years. Her son, Frank Wardens, was the deputy sheriff of Plainfield. That afternoon, Frank came to pick up his mother and found the store locked, lights still on. Inside, a large pool of blood on the floor. The cash register had been ripped from the counter and taken. Frank Warden's mind went immediately to one person. His mother had told him in the days before that Ed Gein had been coming into the store repeatedly, buying small things, sometimes nothing, just watching her. He had even invited her to go ice skating, and she had politely refused. After that, she had noticed him parking across the street for hours, watching the store through his windshield. The store's account book showed that Ed Gein had been the last customer that morning. Fran Kay told the sheriff, "Find Ed Gein." That same evening, Ed was at a neighbor's house, the Hill family, having dinner. While they were eating, someone came to the door with news. Bernice Wardens had been murdered. Ed's only comment was that the killer must be someone with very cold blood. The Hill family laughed nervously. They had just been joking that every woman Ed spent time around eventually disappeared. Ed shrugged and smiled. Shortly after dinner, police arrived at the Hill house and asked Ed to come with them. As he got into the patrol car, Ed said, "I've been framed." The officer asked, "Framed for what?" "For Mrs. Warden's." "What about Mrs. Warden's?" "She's dead, isn't she?" "How do you know she's dead?" "They told me inside." Nobody had told him anything. Ed Gein was arrested. Sheriff Art Schley and Deputy Frank Wardens drove to the Gein farmhouse. The front door was locked. They went around to the back. Above the rear entrance hung a funeral wreath, a decoration usually placed at the door of a home where someone has died. They went inside. The farmhouse was almost completely dark. The windows had been boarded up with planks of wood. There was no electricity. They moved through the rooms with flashlights. In the shed attached to the house, Sheriff Schley felt something brush against his shoulder in the dark. He turned around and raised his flashlight. What he saw would stay with him for the rest of his life. Bernice Warden's body, hanging upside down from the ceiling, decapitated, split open from chest to pelvis, the internal organs removed. She had been dressed and hung like a deer. Both men ran outside into the cold air. The sheriff vomited in the snow. Then they called for backup, and they went back in. What followed was a 4-day search of the Gein property. What investigators found inside that farmhouse has never been fully equaled in American criminal history. 10 human skulls, some cut in half and used as bowls or ashtrays. 2 of them were mounted on the bedposts of Ed's bed. Furniture upholstered with human skin. Lampshades made from human faces. A wastebasket made from human skin. A belt decorated with female nipples. A box containing 9 preserved female genitalia. A vest, constructed from the upper torso of a woman, complete with breasts, designed to be worn. And 9 masks, 9 faces, removed entirely from human skulls, treated with oil to preserve them, and hung on the walls of Ed's bedroom. One of them the investigators recognized. It was Mary Hogan, the woman from the tavern who had disappeared 3 years earlier. In a paper bag in the kitchen, they found the head of Bernice Wardens. Her ears had been pierced with metal hooks. She had been prepared for display. Augusta's bedroom, sealed for 12 years, was the only room in the house kept in order. Everything else was indescribable filth, rotting gubra, and human remains. The total confirmed, at least 15 bodies. 13 exhumed from the cemetery. 2 murdered, Mary Hogan and Bernice Wardens. When psychiatrists interviewed Ed Gein, they found something unexpected. He was not raving. He was not violent. He was cooperative and even polite. He was also clearly disconnected from reality in ways that were profound and permanent. He denied cannibalism and necrophilia, but human organs were found in pots and pans on his stove. He said he couldn't remember killing Mary Hogan. Her face was hanging in his bedroom. He said he dug up graves because he missed his mother. He had been making a suit of female skin to wear to become her. The psychiatrists concluded that Ed suffered from severe schizophrenia, warped by decades of emotional isolation, repression, and obsession. He was legally incompetent to stand trial. He would spend the rest of his life in a psychiatric institution. He died there on July 26, 1984, of respiratory failure. He was buried next to his mother, in the same cemetery where he had dug up bodies. Ed Gein never became a famous killer in the traditional sense. He was declared insane. He never went to prison. He gave few interviews, but his influence on popular culture is almost unmatched. Robert Bloch, who lived in Wisconsin and followed the case closely, published Psycho in 1960. Moving the story to a motel and creating Norman Bates, the polite, soft-spoken killer who kept his mother's memory alive in the most disturbing way possible. The following year, Alfred Hitchcock turned it into one of the most famous films ever made. In 1974, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre introduced Leatherface, a killer who wore masks made of human skin, in a house decorated with human remains. And in 1991, Thomas Harris's The Silence of the Lambs gave us Buffalo Bill, a killer who abducted women to take their skin to build a suit to transform himself. 3 very different stories. 3 very different monsters. All of them rooted in one quiet, polite farmer from Plainfield, Wisconsin. The man no one thought was dangerous. The man everyone described as a little strange, but harmless. The truth, as always, is stranger than fiction. And this time, the fiction never came close.
Excelente trabajo. Espero que esta historia te haya ayudado a mejorar tu comprensión del inglés. Si disfrutaste este contenido, suscríbete a Enigma English para seguir aprendiendo con historias reales. Nos vemos en el próximo video.